Hello everyone, I am Jesse, or GameOverJesse, here with Ilya and Daniel for the Hylian Gamescast. Today, we're going to be discussing a sort of what-if pseudo-sequel to Ocarina of Time that was cancelled. And I say like a what-if pseudo-sequel because it wasn't necessarily cancelled as much as it was just changed to a different game, which was an Ocarina of Time sequel that became Twilight Princess. And we also know that Twilight Princess also began as a Wind Waker sequel as well. We do have Phantom Hourglass, but that came after Wind Waker 2 was actually cancelled. It was originally going to be Wind Waker 2. A lot of people had a lot of issues with the art style and everything with Wind Waker, so Japan ended up changing the art style. They kept some of the dungeons that they had designed, they kept some of the new items, the story plot and everything, and they just basically changed the art style to make it more realistic to fit with the Western audience. And that's how we ended up with Twilight Princess. But during that middle of that change, whenever they had started coming up with new story ideas for Twilight Princess, the original intentions for like the first couple of years wasn't to make it an Ocarina of Time sequel as it is now, to where it's still a sequel, it just takes place hundreds of years later. Whereas the original thing was it was going to be the exact same Link, just carrying on as an adult later on in life. And we do see a lot of elements that were kept from that. We know in the game that like Ocarina of Time Link is still in the game as the hero shade. He also appears as a wolf, the golden wolf that you have to find around. So there's elements of the, I put that in quotes, the Ocarina of Time sequel still in there. And in a lot of ways it plays as a sort of spiritual sequel to Ocarina of Time, where you are born, raised in the forest, just as the original Ocarina of Time hero was. Your first dungeon is the forest temple, then you go to the fire temple, then you go to the water temple, and then the big switch happens in Ocarina of Time. You become an adult, the world changes. In Twilight Princess, I forgot exactly what it was. Like Zant comes in and basically wrecks Lineru. But yeah, like they both play very similarly, so you can tell that there was the parts of the sequel that was there. Beginning with Aonuma, he says, "By the way, the wolf transformation idea started some 3 years ago in the GDC when we were thinking of what we should do with the next Zelda game. I woke up in my hotel in San Francisco, completely disoriented, like if I had lost my memory. Some seconds later, I remembered I was in the US to give a speech at GDC, which is the game developer conference for the people that don't know. Maybe it was because of the stress. I then thought how surprising it'd be if in the next Zelda game, Link started off being imprisoned or turned into a wolf." The interviewer says, "I see." Aonuma continues, "Back then we considered making it a sequel of Ocarina of Time some years later, but then we thought of the first-time players who wouldn't understand a thing if you started as a wolf, so we changed it and had human Link from the start." So there's the beginning of that second paragraph there where it says they wanted it to be a sequel of Ocarina of Time, but then the players wouldn't really understand if it was a sequel to Ocarina of Time, but then you start out as a wolf. Like, there's some weird things going on there. So they ended up making it, which there's an Iwata Asks that kind of goes more in depth on this, where they talk about how they completely changed the entire beginning of the game. Like they mentioned that Ordon Forest or Ordon Village was supposed to be in an entirely different location, and at the last minute, Aonuma came in and was like, "Hey, what if we changed this and put it here?" And then the game was delayed for an entire year. So, yeah. But yeah, like, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, instead of making it a direct sequel, so that in Majora's Mask, it kind of made sense because it released 2 years later, but then Twilight Princess releases like 10 years or whatever after Ocarina of Time, and they already had Wind Waker and Majora's Mask that came after, and then Twilight Princess was taking place in a completely different timeline. So it's like if they did have like a third Ocarina of Time game, or third Hero of Time game, I mean, then a lot of people who didn't play Ocarina of Time and just played Wind Waker might come into it thinking, oh, what's going on here? I didn't play Ocarina of Time, I didn't play Majora's Mask. What's going on? Or it could have been in the other timeline, so that even if you did play Majora's Mask, this has... No, I guess it would have to do with it, because Link wasn't... Yeah, so yeah, it would be...
Yeah.
I almost got confused there, yeah. So it would have to be the Majora's Mask sequel, because Link wasn't in the other timeline. That's why there was the flood. Interesting. All right, guys.
And then the third one, he's dead. So.
Yeah,
Very true.
Unless he had a fairy in his back pocket. No, so that makes sense. Like, you know, if someone didn't play Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, which Majora's Mask, there would have been a ton of people that didn't play it because when it released, it only sold like half as many copies as the original Ocarina of Time because it released so late on the system, and then you needed the expansion pack just to play it. So there was a ton of people that didn't play it when it originally came out. And then, again, if you come in from playing Wind Waker or some of these other games, and then you didn't play Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, then you might come into the game a bit confused on the backstory. Again, why you're starting out as a wolf, how did the hero of time become a wolf, who knows. But anyways, I just thought this was a very interesting little tidbit here. It actually came from someone on Twitter earlier when I was asking for beta facts or canceled stuff from Twilight Princess. Someone commented, it was Ether101_Prime. So thank you for this little tidbit, and then he gave me a link to the interview. So what do you guys think? Starting with you, Daniel.
Oh, well, it makes a lot of sense, actually, because I assumed at the time that it was just a placeholder, but if you watch very early trailers for Twilight Princess, it doesn't, like, the way the story unfolds, it shows a bit of like horseback Link, and then it shows like there's a trailer that shows basically I'm starting out in prison as a wolf Link. There's some very different aesthetic changes from the final version, like the Twilight Realm is grayscale rather than just being really like heavy on the bloom effect, and Midna's hair is different as well. But also in that trailer, Link's voice is the reused voice clips from Ocarina of Time, not the Twilight Princess voice actor. So I remember, I guess at the time, thinking it's just a placeholder till they get a new voice actor or something, which makes sense. But then if it was intended to be a direct sequel with the same Link, then this sort of the way this trailer was built makes a lot more sense to sort of where the story of that game was at the time that trailer came out. I would have to actually go digging and find the trailer. I'm just pulling all of this out from memory, so I could be way off the mark. But I mean, it's not unheard of for them to have a story in mind and then change it at the last minute anyways, because they did that with Ocarina of Time as well, which we've talked about in previous episodes of the podcast. And Twilight Princess also, they were going to make a Wind Waker 2 initially as well, and then didn't. So I think I agree with the decision overall, because as much as people are always like, I want a third Hero of Time game, I want this so bad. If there was a lot of people, Twilight Princess was their first Zelda game. Like, a lot of people. And at the time, it was the best-selling Zelda game as well. And it wouldn't... There's that level of accessibility that would be gone if it were a direct sequel, unless they really changed a lot of things. And that's the thing, if they made a third Hero of Time game now, there are people now who are Zelda fans who were born long after those N64 games came out, and they probably, like, some of them have not played these games, and so they'll be frankly lost and confused. So sorry to crush everyone's dreams. But overall, I think I agree with Nintendo's and Aonuma's decision to make these changes just to make it accessible for people coming into the series.
I'm also really glad that you don't start the game as a wolf, because
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Also, then changing into human Link would be jarring, and also then a lot of people did not like the wolf segments. So can you imagine all those people buying the game and then being like, this sucks, and then not getting to the point where you could turn back into highly form?
Yeah.
People just drop the game and like, no, none for me, thanks.
It actually doesn't even actually take that long to get back into human form. I just started replaying Twilight Princess, and I haven't played it since I was like
Which version?
11 HD.
Oh yeah, which
Nice.
Oh good, the best version.
Yeah, because I got to the Tears of Light segment and it had this, and I was like, oh wait, this is
They did
HD.
shorten it though. Yeah.
It's been a long time, and since the last Zelda game I played was Breath of the Wild, there were so many moments of like, whoa, this is a lot more different and difficult for me, but now I'm used to it. I was like, I can't. My mom especially, she's like, why don't you just climb that wall? I'm like, you can't climb everything.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
No jumping.
It's funny.
No climbing. No sprinting.
When
It's
I
nice to be
replayed
able to roll again, though.
yes, but when I replayed Wind Waker HD a bit ago, I would like try and jump or climb the walls, and I was like, right,
Can't do
no,
that.
can't just jump off my boat onto this island and scale this wall. Oh no,
It doesn't work that way.
gotta wait till I get the hook shot. And then I'm like, that's why they had the hook shot. That's why they didn't get the hook shot in Breath of the Wild. You just don't need that. So,
Yeah. But on the subject of like this interview and everything, I also am glad they didn't make it like a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, because Majora's Mask worked out because it was a completely different story, and like it's the hero of time, but it's not a necessary part of the story. I don't know. I mean, I guess they could have worked with that with Twilight Princess, could have made it a not so necessary part of the story, but if you're I don't know. I'm just glad they didn't do it. I'm glad they had the hero of time in it as the hero shade, but I don't know. I'm just thinking it was a good decision that they didn't go with that. They had nods to the hero of time, but it was like, nah, let's just. Majora's Mask was good, but it was its own thing. The only nod to like the past game was Zelda, and that he's looking for an old friend, which is Navi. Well, I guess there's like Skull Kid. Like, they're not things that you're like, you have to know Ocarina of Time to understand those references. You know? And most people that played Majora's Mask probably played Ocarina of Time right before because they were so close.
And it's probably why there are so many other similarities. Like the first dungeon that you go into is still like Deku Tree-esque. And then there's the Deku symbol that's everywhere. You find like the Queen Rutella or whatever, who's named after Queen Ruto. It was like that might have meant to have been Queen Ruto or Princess Ruto at some point, like when it was originally the Ocarina of Time sequel. And then you have, you mentioned the Skull Kid was in Majora's Mask, and there's a lot of people that think it's the same Skull Kid from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask that's teaching you, like, your way through the Lost Woods in this. So originally it could have been that it wasn't like a theory, it could have originally intended to have been the Link. But I think the funniest part is, and I mentioned this in a video that I have coming up, is that he just wakes up one day and is like, what if you played as a wolf in the next Zelda game? And then they just go in and completely change everything around for it. Because that idea came like while they were in the middle of developing Twilight Princess. That didn't come like as soon as they're done with Wind Waker and they're like, oh, let's make a new game. Let's have him turn into a wolf. Because he's like at GDC to give a speech about Zelda games, likely the development of Twilight Princess and what to expect. And he just wakes up confused and is like, oh, what if you played as a wolf? And it's like, I don't know. And then there was an interview in the Iwata Asks where Miyamoto talks about like whenever Aonuma brought it up, he kind of like, he thought everyone would just laugh at him, so he kind of brought it up as if he was joking. And then there was a few people that liked it, and Miyamoto was like, but that would be boring. Why would you want to stare at the back of a wolf during the game?
Yeah.
And then they tried coming up with ideas and ways to make it interesting. So then they brought in Midna. That way you would have an actual character that you could look at instead of just looking at this wolf's butt for 3 hours at a time.
Yeah.
So if they wouldn't have had the wolf there, then Midna wouldn't have even existed, or if she did exist, she would have existed in a completely different form.
And it's funny because she ended up becoming the titular character of the story.
Yeah. So it's crazy how like one simple thing literally him waking up being confused ended up completely changing the game around. What about Okami? I don't know. Like, maybe they didn't have that thought of.
They didn't have Miyamoto being like,
that would be boring.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's everything that I have to say about it. Like, I would love a third Hero of Time game, but I don't know. I'm glad Twilight Princess is its own thing because it adds a lot more lore and stuff to it, because now you have a Link who is the descendant of a past Link.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Hero of Time still showing up. And maybe that was another thing, is like they had all of those techniques that you learn. Maybe Link, the Hero of Time that you would have originally been playing as, would have learned all of those techniques a different way. But since they changed the story, they had to be like, oh, well, how do we have this Link that you're playing as now learn these? And they're like, well, why not just let the old Link teach it to the new Link? So, I don't know. It's all interesting. I like it. But I guess we can move on to the next thing, unless someone has something. All right,
No.
Daniel, do you want to take it?
Hey everyone, it's me again, Elia Rose. I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching this video. And you know what? If you're a fan of videos like this, you should totally subscribe and give this video a like, and comment below to let us know what type of videos you would like to see us create in the future. And if you would really like to support all of us here at the GameOverJesse channel, please consider purchasing a GameOverJesse t-shirt or becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/GameOverJesse, where you can receive many rewards, such as getting shoutouts, having any topic or theory that you select discussed on the podcast or made into its own video, having your question answered, joining on as a guest on the podcast, and playing with us during our Twitch live streams at twitch.tv/GameOverJesse, and much, much more.